Well, another Brave season has come to an end. Time to say goodbye to 2025.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at shortstopball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below so others can find us here on YouTube. We almost got to 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, about 115, 16 subscribers short right now. Hopefully we'll get there by the end of the World Series. So thank you so much for your support there and the continued growth of this channel all season long. On the audio side, you can help out as well. Just leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Be a lot of content coming your way this offseason. So you're going to want to make sure that you are tuned in and locked on to Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of each and every day. Big shout out to all my everydayers out there still continuing to battle through the rest of this 2025 season all the way to the bitter end on Sunday afternoon, which actually ended on a high note. We'll talk about some of that on today's episode, but mostly we're going to be saying goodbye to 2025. Now, we still in the weeks to come, we'll take some looks back to some of the best moments, some of the worst moments. We'll look at some of the numbers, and we'll obviously do some player recaps as well as player previews. That's really going to be the schedule for the month of October while we gear up for the postseason. But today, I really just want to reflect, reminisce on 2025. This is going to be a little bit more of an informal podcast, so apologize if this sounds a little bit more choppy and a little bit more dead time than usual, but I want to give those who are here with me live, and thank you for those who are in here live, to give some of their comments on the 2025 season. So if you are here live on YouTube, put some of your comments in there about 2025. My question, and I posed this on social media, I'm going to read some of these comments too. What is your lasting thought impression of 2025? When you look back on the 2025 season, what word will describe the 2025 season for you? So let me know that in the comment section below. Again, I'll read some of your comments on social media. And if you're here with me live, go ahead and start sending those in. I'll get to those here in the second segment of the show. Before we get into this episode, let me remind you that it's brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Go to www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Well, in today's podcast, like I said, we're gonna say goodbye to 2025. The season has come to an end, at least the regular season and the season overall for the Atlanta Braves. They finished with a record of 76-86, well short of what many of us have predicted. I didn't go back and listen. I'm pretty sure I predicted the Braves to win 94 games this year, so I was wrong. But so were many of you. And now for those of you who are always pessimistic and said that the Braves wouldn't win more than 80 games this year, here's your pat on the back. But certainly disappointing in many respects for a team that came into this year with high expectations, coming off a year before that where, they made the postseason, but they easily went out, 2 games. And really, you knew going into the postseason, they didn't have much of a chance with that offense and all the injuries that they had. So it's really back-to-back disappointing seasons now for the Atlanta Braves. But after 2024, you got all the injured players back offensively. You were thinking that offense was going to take off and be one of the best in baseball again, and it just wasn't. And this was a team that had the second best odds to win the World Series behind the Dodgers, who had obviously bought everyone in the offseason. So a lot of people had high expectations for this Braves team coming in, and they just did not live up to it. David Keith said that they predicted 103 wins. You were worse than I was. Donta Spite says worst season ever. We'll get into that more in the second segment, but I don't think that's that far off. Certainly for what the expectations were coming into the season. Lone Wolf says rough season, but happy with the last game. Charlie got a good send-off. I was appreciative of that. Again, it might touch on that a little bit more. Michael Stancil says, Jake, bud, you've been a bright spot through a disappointing season. Try to watch every day when I can. Thank you so much for that, Michael. But this is disappointing. And just to quickly, take you through the season. And again, we'll do more of a recap, looking at the numbers and all of that later this week. But this season started out rough. 0-7 road trip against the Padres and Dodgers. And in that road trip, you lose your only big offseason addition in Jerickson Profar to a suspension that you could not have foreseen. And maybe they knew about it a little bit earlier in spring training, and maybe that's why they went out and got an Alex Verdugo. Who knows? But certainly that was a huge blow to this team. That was a guy that was supposed to come in and energize the clubhouse, somebody that was a positive energy and guy for the Padres, somebody that would put the ball in play, do things a little bit differently on the offensive side, and he was gone 2 games in. I think that it was a huge factor in the Braves' struggles early on. However, do not forget, and I always try to remind people of this because everybody likes to point to the 0-7 start, and that wasn't great. But by mid-May, they had recovered, and they were a game over 500. Only time all year that they got over 500. And you got Ronald back at the end of May. So you thought that was going to be the point where this team took off. And Ronald was out of this world when he came back. Did everything he could, but the team still couldn't win. And instead of taking off when Ronald came back, they started out June on another 7-game losing streak. And from this one, they could not recover. Like I said, they got above 500 in mid-May, kind of just scuffled the end of that month, and then started off June 0-7. And that was basically it. Now, there was hope. We tried to hang on to hope, or at least I did, up until the All-Star break. I kept putting these scenarios together. You do this, you do that. You give yourself a chance in the second half. But then any hope of a turnaround was completely thrown out the window when Chris Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach went down. And the pitching staff in the second half just could not do enough to help what was an improved Braves offense. They went from a 703 team OPS in the first half or before the All-Star break to a 743 OPS after it. Since Jerickson Profar returned, it was the team WRC plus was a little bit over 100, with the 100 being average. So it was an above average offense, certainly not fantastic, but they were better in the second half. But the team ERA after the break was over 5. And it's just the pitcher injury, the starting rotation injuries at that point, even with a better offense, it was just too much to overcome. But try to remind people that's not why the Braves didn't make the postseason. They didn't make the postseason because the offense was so bad in the first half, and they put themselves in such a big hole. And I would even say the 0-7 start isn't why they made the postseason, because they recovered from that. It was the second really bad stretch of games. It was an awful June, which began with an 0-7 start. That was where the season crumbled and ultimately fell away from the Atlanta Braves. So for me, and I want to get your opinion, and again in the second segment here, if you're on YouTube, you can start putting those comments in. But my question for you is your lasting thought for 2025. My lasting thought is, at least right now, wasted. Not in the term that maybe some people think of the word wasted, but a wasted season. Another year with this core that was essentially wasted. And like I said, 2024, they still made the postseason, but nobody really thought that team was going to do anything, and they didn't. They got bounced in 2 games that really weren't even felt all that close. And it's just frustrating. You had the World Series in 2021. You come back and win 100 games each of the next 2 seasons, and it feels like you're slowly declining. You have a rough year in 2024. Yes, there were a lot of injuries on the offensive side that attributed to that. You come back in 2025 thinking things are going to be different. Everybody's healthy. And I know the pitchers, the starting rotation got hurt in the second half. But like I said, the first half is where things really fell apart. And now it's back-to-back years of you really feeling like you've wasted an opportunity with this core. So that's kind of my thought on this. When I reflect on 2025 right now, I think it's just a waste. Now, future, what this could turn into, I could look back at 2025 and think of it as a year of transition or a reset. This season has the potential, when we look back at it, to be the year where everything kind of changed for this group and this core and set them off on a new direction and sent them back on the upward trend. This season has the potential to wake up this core, wake up this clubhouse, and hopefully this front office. And if that happens and we see a rejuvenated team next year, a more focused team, a more disciplined team, if we go into the offseason and we see a more dedicated front office to spend money to give them the resources that they need and the depth that they need to get through a season, then we could look back at 2025 as the turning point in this core. Because I still believe that this group has enough talent and ability to compete and win a World Series, but they need some help and they need some refocused. That's not a word. They need to be refocused. They need some new energy. I think they need a new manager to help that. We'll see. But you could, right now I look at the season and I just think it's a waste. Especially when you look at 83 wins could have gotten you into the postseason, and you could have gone into the postseason with an improved offense, certainly not great, but with a Matt Olson, a Ronald, a Drake Baldwin, you could have gone into the postseason with a rotation of Chris Sale and Spencer Strider and Hurston Waldrop and Bryce Elder. I'm not saying they would have been the favorites. I probably would have put them as the sixth or seventh best team, even in this postseason group. But the fact that you only needed 83 wins and still couldn't get in, I just think of this as another wasted year. But like I said, hopefully, depending on how the offseason goes and how next season goes, you could see this as a big turnaround transition year for the Atlanta Braves, where all of a sudden we just hit the reset button and you see this team start going back in a good direction. That's what I'm hopeful for. But right now, my only thought of 2025 is just it's a wasted season. It's a bad season. You wasted another year of Ronald Acuna Jr., who was amazing since coming back. You wasted another really good year of Matt Olson. All these guys. And it's really it's frustrating at the moment. All right, but next I want to get to some of your comments. What do you think? What is your lasting thought right now on 2025? We'll get into that here next. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most about them is how portable they are. Big, tasty, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost that you need. It kicks in super fast and it's sugar-free, so you don't have to worry about crashing later. Me and my wife always trying to get on these sugar-free kicks to be a little bit more healthier. And 5-Hour Energy, you can do that and get your energy, which we both also need for our 3 little kids that we're chasing around. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. This episode is also brought to you by Zippix toothpicks. Whether you're looking for nicotine satisfaction or an energy boost, Zippix has you covered with their nicotine and caffeine-infused toothpicks. For nicotine users, Zippix provides a discreet way to satisfy cravings and the hand-to-mouth habit without vaping or smoking. Zippix can be a helpful tool as you work to reduce your dependence on vaping or smoking. Available in 6 great flavors with 2 milligram and 3 milligram nicotine options. And if you need energy without the crash, their caffeine toothpicks are a game changer. You can use caffeine toothpicks for big meetings, long drives. They give you energy without the jitters, and the flavors like peppermint watermelon ice actually taste great. So go to zippixtoothpicks.com. Use code LOCKEDON for 10% off your first order. Must be 21 or older to order. And warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. That's zippixtoothpicks.com. Promo code LOCKEDON. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix toothpicks. As always, thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. The guys at MLB Game Night, they're continuing through the postseason. So you want to keep track with that, keep up with the big things happening each and every night during the postseason. They got the wild card round starting on Tuesday. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On MLB and check that out. All right, let's get into your thoughts from this season, because I gave you mine and how I feel. We'll start with social media first. And Chick says how ownership cheaped out and didn't spend on bullpen or starting pitching. That's definitely one of the reasons why 2025 was so difficult, is because you knew that there were depth issues, specifically in the bullpen. I don't think anybody could have predicted losing all the starting pitchers that they did for the significant amounts of time that they did. But definitely you knew going into the season that the bullpen had the potential to be bad. And they held their own at times, but for the most part, it wasn't good. It certainly wasn't great. Brock says it's finally over. That's the lasting thoughts there. Andy Richardson says, with such high expectations, this has been the most disappointing season of my lifetime. And we had a similar comment about that earlier, or like that earlier in the YouTube comments here. And that seems crazy to say, because there have certainly been worse seasons. There's been teams that have lost more games. There's been disappointing teams. But as I said at the top, this team, after 2024, where you made the excuses on all the injuries, you came into 2025 just completely focused, wanting to get back to where you were. Favorites by pretty much everybody to win the division. Second best odds to win the World Series. You only needed 83 wins to get into the postseason, and you're left out. And you're left out by a pretty good margin, 8 games back of a playoff spot. It's hard to disagree that this is one of the most disappointing seasons the Braves have had in a long time when you consider the expectations. Julio Ferrer says similar. It was only necessary to win 8 more games. And you look at all those one-run games. You look at those games with the bullpen blew, where you didn't help your bullpen out. It's definitely hurts. A Big Dog fan says disappointment, injuries, underperformance by the core players that weren't hurt. The emergence of Baldwin and Waldrop, I hope. Poor decisions by Snit. There were definitely some questionable decisions by Snicker early on in this season. Dustin Mount says injuries and lack of production from 2 one-run game, or that was the first one. 2 is one-run games killed the Braves. If they were 500 in those, they would make the playoffs. And I said this on the postcast too. You make your own luck sometimes, and there's a reason they lost a lot of those one-run games. Now, that is an absurd amount, and you expect that to kind of level off, but there's also a reason they lost a lot of those one-run games. E. Fuentes, what happened to our offense? Will it ever come back? Labor says too many games that were winnable because they couldn't get players over home plate. Starting pitching getting decimated. Hitting going stone cold for extended periods of time. I think one of the things, and again, we'll get into the numbers later in the week, is the runners in scoring position, which is where I think Labor's was going there. Coach Gordon Bombay says, why did we use Hector Neris as a setup man? Go all the way back to opening day, going to a guy that you ended up cutting like a week later, and you brought him in a big spot, which again just goes to the point that not enough was done to help the bullpen in the offseason. And that certainly is a game that still stings. And who knows how that road trip would have gone differently. And maybe it doesn't. But yeah, that one still hurts. Smokey Joe, too many one-run losses. Win half those, you make the playoffs. Nurse Cindy says there are so many hundreds of great young players in the minors who need a chance turning this team back around. Chris Godfredson, who gave me a one-word answer, which is what I was looking for, Chris. So thank you, says depressing. And I think that's a good one too. It certainly is. It was very difficult covering this team this year, just knowing what they could have been and just seeing them flounder as spectacularly as they did. JD03 says Snicker stinks as their lasting impression of 2025. Well, it might be back. Looking at some of the YouTube comments now. So if you want to put some of your thoughts in, if you're on YouTube live here with me, what are your lasting impressions of 2025? You want to submit those in, start reading some of those off. Todd Twilley says, yep, Snit on opening day showed this was the season of his bad decisions. And there were a lot of bad decisions on Snicker. I don't think it's just him, but there certainly were some bad decisions. You cannot ignore the fact that the core players of this team just did not perform, and that's not on Snicker. Jeffrey Humphrey says enlightening. That's an interesting word to use there, Jeffrey, everydayer of the podcast, big supporter. Thank you so much for that. But I'd like for you to elaborate on that. What do you mean by what was enlightening to you? Was it the fact that maybe this team wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be? what part of this season was enlightening to you, I guess, there, Jeffrey? Let me know if you get a chance here in the comments section. And Denton Watson said it was sad. This team was terrible. Yeah, it was sad. I mean, it was especially the first half. The second half was a little bit better. But yeah, it was sad. It was really hard to watch in the first half of this season. Jeffrey's elaborated a little bit more, so we need to hit better. Yeah. And again, how much of that was just were they making a drastic shift in offensive philosophy and it was taking guys a long time to catch up? Were they trying to switch to an offensive philosophy that these players weren't built for? I think these are questions and things they really have to look at in the offseason. Tim Atkins says disastrous. I think that's a great word for it as well. It certainly was a disastrous season from mostly beginning to end. Rich Leckman says unfulfilling. That's a great one. That might be my favorite one yet, because I think that really does a good job of encapsulating how I'm feeling, because I expected more. I expected a lot more from this team, and they didn't live up to that. They did not fulfill that. They did not fulfill their own expectations. They did not fulfill my expectations. They did not fulfill the odds makers' expectations. And therefore, unfulfilling is a pretty spot on word for that. Clay says, it was another year of blaming injuries. And I hope that's not what happened. Excuse me, that is part of what happened. Clay's comment was, it was another year of blaming injuries. And I hope that's not what happens. Because, as I've already said multiple times in this podcast, injuries weren't the reason this team didn't make the postseason. They were bad before the starting pitching injuries happened. You got to know injuries are going to happen through a season. You didn't do enough in the offseason to prepare for that. And again, you can't prepare for losing all 5 of your opening day starters. I get that. But that can't be the excuse this year. Like I said, when Ronald came back to this team, maybe just before, because he came back the end of May. At mid-May was when they were a game over 500. But when Ronald came back to this team, they were still very much in the race. And the rest of the guys just absolutely fell apart. The rest of this core just did not step up. And that wasn't injuries. That was just players underperforming. So I definitely agree with that. David Key says unpreparedness. That was one of the things I wanted to see from the offense this year. Is in 2024, it felt like there was no game plan going to the plate. It was more of just go up there, get your 3 best swings, and that was it. This year, they were definitely more patient, but it was patient without a plan. And I think that was what was really frustrating about it, is they'd go up there and just take strikes and swing at pitches out of the zone because they were trying to be more patient, and it put them in bad counts, and then they were still chasing. So yeah, I think unpreparedness, I'm still not seeing an approach from guys when they go up there, except for maybe Drake Baldwin. And I think we even saw it a little bit from Matt Olson this year. And I think what I'm mainly speaking on here is a 2-strike approach. I'm not seeing much of a 2-strike approach from these hitters. I use the example all the time of Freddie Freeman, and he is one of the best at going up there and ambushing. He will go up there, and if he thinks he's getting a certain pitch in a certain spot, he's going to try to ambush it. But if he does that and he misses it, he's now thinking left center. He's now thinking shoot a ball over the shortstop's head. Not many guys on this team do that. I don't even say they can't do that, but they don't do that. And that's very frustrating. Get one more here from Michael Stansel, who says substandard. Yeah, and the standard for this team and the standard for this group should be, at very minimum, reach the postseason. And I still think the standard should be get to the World Series, win a World Series. And this is another year where they just don't live up to that standard and those expectations. All right, next we will talk about what happened on Sunday. Charlie Morton's perfect send-off. Snit, is he coming back? We'll also talk about what happened around Major League Baseball and set you up for the postseason. We'll do all of that here next. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There are so many products out there, and it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should go to Nutrafol for a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. Whether you're at work, out with friends, or even just getting ready in the morning, Nutrafol gives you more confidence in your daily routine. And you can feel good about it knowing Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Well, the Atlanta Braves did win their final game on Sunday over the Pittsburgh Pirates, and a lot of fun stuff happened in that game. We had the perfect ending, I think, for Charlie Morton. Now, he still hasn't announced his retirement, so it was kind of uncomfortable, but you got him to come out for the second inning, strike out a batter on a curveball, take him out of the game, get the standing ovation, his family on the field. I feel like whether Charlie wants to come back or not, that's a pretty good way to go out. I mean, the man's done a lot, made a lot of money, won a couple World Series. I think it's time to go be with your family. Got demoted to the bullpen this year, eventually got cut by a team this year. I think it's probably time to hang it up, but what a career for him. I mean, you talk about a second half turnaround, and he did some amazing things in the second half of that career, respected, loved by everybody. So appreciate what Charlie Morton's done. Glad that, part of that has been with this Braves team. I think we'll all remember the game 1 of the World Series, breaking his leg, striking out Jose Altuve. Forever be hopefully part of Braves country. So that was a really cool moment. I don't think it could have gone any better with the send-off there for Charlie Morton. You also got a 450-foot blast from Ronald Acuna Jr. That was fun. You got to see Nick Allen make one more outstanding play, although it came from second base, but still a great play to end the ball game. Michael Harris with a great play. Chris Sale coming out and dominating. Raisel Iglesias closing it out. You saw a lot of really good things on Sunday, a lot of fun things to end the year for this Braves crew. So again, sad to see it go, even in a tough season like this. I'll be sad tomorrow night when sit down for the night and I don't have a Braves game to turn on. I won't have any baseball game to turn on, unfortunately, until Tuesday. But I'll miss it. It won't take me long, and I will miss watching the Braves every single night. Again, don't matter how bad the season is, it's always sad. Still nothing on Brian Snitker. In fact, it seems like he's leaning towards wanting to come back. I don't know how I feel about that, or I guess I do know how I feel about that. But I think it's going to be a difficult and awkward conversation with between Alex Anthopoulos and Brian Snitker, because it certainly seems like Brian Snitker is leaning towards coming back. I said it coming into the weekend. If we didn't get an announcement before the weekend, I think Snitz wants to come back. And so now it's just going to be an awkward conversation between him and AA, because I can't have another manager with this core 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And here's the other thing too. Snit goes out right now, and maybe even if he comes back and it's bad next year, but he comes back and it's bad again next year, and this team is unfulfilling again, it's going to tarnish Snit's legacy a little bit, I think. You go out right now, I think everybody still appreciates you, loves you. And like I said, I think people will, even after if next year was a bad year. And I said this several weeks ago, I think Snit could come back and you get him the right pieces. The guys get, motivated. I think this team could be really good next year, even with Snit as manager, even though I do think it's time for him to step aside and just bring somebody in with a new voice, new energy. But I still think they could win next year with Snit. But I'm ready to move on at the end of the day. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll get an announcement. They'll obviously have their exit interviews and all of that here in the upcoming days. Remember last year, AA said we're keeping the whole staff, and then like 2 days later, they fired 3 or 4 guys. So we'll see what happens here in the coming week. We'll probably have a big breaking news podcast at some point this week. Now getting to the postseason races, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it here, although me and Lindsay did on the postcast. If you haven't given that a listen, the New York Mets completely Metsed and are not going to make the postseason. Both they and the Reds lost on the final day, but the Reds had the tiebreaker. So they get in and they get the misfortunes of facing the Dodgers in the first round. So I don't really think it mattered which team was going to advance there. But the Mets missed the playoffs with the big lead that they had. So that was fun. Certainly was rooting for that. So in the National League, you got the Reds versus the Dodgers and the Padres versus the Cubs. That Padres-Cubs series should be really fun in the wild card round. And then you got the Brewers as the 1 seed and the Phillies as the 2 seed. You could get Phillies and Dodgers in the second round. That could be really fun. You could get Cubs and Brewers in the second round. That could be really fun. Craig Counsell going up against his former team. I think I'm big Brewers, certainly big Brewers, Reds, Padres fan. Cubs fine, whatever. But definitely pulling for the Brewers, Padres, and Reds on the National League side. And the American League side, the Tigers and the Guardians both get in, and they're facing each other in the wild card round. So that's pretty cool. And then you got the Red Sox and the Yankees in the other wild card series. So that'll be really fun to watch. Blue Jays got the top seed. Who had the Blue Jays and the Brewers being the top seeds coming into 2025? But the Blue Jays were the top seed in the American League and the Mariners with the number 2 seed. I think I'm a big Mariners fan over there. Mariners or Blue Jays, really. I would love to see either one of those teams get to the World Series. But let me know what you think about the postseason. Who do you got in the World Series right now? I'm going to say, I haven't really given this much thought. I put myself on the spot here. I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to say Yankees, Phillies. That's kind of boring, and I wouldn't like that at all. But I'm going to say Yankees, Phillies. Yankees have been playing much better down the stretch. Aaron Judge has been going nuclear. Of course, that doesn't always carry over into October for him. But I'm going to say Yankees, Phillies. I think that's going to be your World Series matchup. Let me know what you think. Clay says Guardians. That would be really cool. Stephen P says anybody with the Dodgers, Phillies, or Yankees. So that's definitely who it's going to be. But we'll talk more about that. Hopefully you're into the postseason. We'll talk about it more here throughout the month of October. But that would do it for this episode. Goodbye to 2025 for the Atlanta Braves. Again, disappointing season, unfulfilling. I think that was the best one that I got here on the show today to describe the 2025 season. We were not filled. Our cup is not flowing over from this 2025 season. But still, loved watching this team every night. Thank you so much to all of you who listened each and every night, stuck with me through the season. We'll be here. I'll still be here 5 days a week through the middle of December. So we'll have a lot of content coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And we will talk to you next time.